Are you ready? Steve, you ready? We can pass the pad
No, I
around.
got it. I'm okay. I'll add the last names.
You want people to sign in? Okay.
I'll add it.
All right. I believe we're going to begin, Bob. Okay. Hello, everybody. First thing on the agenda are the approval of the minutes, and thanks to Carol for taking them in Steve's absence for fire training. So may I have a motion to approve?
I move that we approve the minutes from the meeting of
February 10th.
February 10th.
Second?
I'll second.
Any additions or corrections? All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Rick?
Because I wasn't there.
Right. Okay, good. Dan, the question that I asked Steve, and I have not heard the answer, is I'm going to presume that Steve was appointed.
Steve is not appointed
Why not?
because it didn't come up at the last meeting.
That's what I'm trying to tell you. They don't meet until the fourth Thursday.
It wasn't that like Steve was rejected his appointment. It just was not
But
an
there's still
agenda
plenty of
item.
time for that to happen.
Well,
There's still time
this committee has by acclamation accepted Steve.
for
I'll
and
still
he
be
is the
recording.
secretary.
as
Alright.
only one member of a 5-member board. I have no issue with Steve sitting here anyway. Has yet to be appointed.
Good. Very good. All right. Now we're going to deal with the topic that we wanted to deal with, which is a big topic, and we may not get to anything else, and that is this committee has moved to recommend consolidation to the joint boards. The question of fire districts, fire companies, and fire departments need to be addressed by this committee and a recommendation made to the joint boards regarding that part. All right, Steve has done a lot of research for us. This afternoon, Susan sent out the long-awaited Kent Gardner,
Which wasn't much.
and it was
No,
not
it
much.
was information we previously had, as I mentioned in my note.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it still wasn't
So,
much.
No,
we
it's not.
need to.
But I'll flesh that
All
out
right.
for you. There'll be much by the time
So
we're done.
first
today.
of all, Steve, if you are willing to do this, review the difference between, we know we cannot have a fire department because if we do the consolidation, that means we are moving into a different arena on fire protection. So would you quickly inform the group of the difference between the different kinds of fire districts and as opposed to an independent fire company?
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
Do you want one of us to take notes as you talk?
No, because since I already have this,
Okay,
I'll
okay.
incorporate what I do, you know,
I mean,
later. on
I
my own
don't know about
time,
you,
and
but I
I'll-
can't talk and
can-
write at the same time.
No, but I don't need to, because this is actually, in a rare exception from my custom, this is actually pretty concise.
If I could just jump in when Steve gets done, I did have a follow-up conversation today with the Department of State, a very lengthy conversation on fire departments and all this stuff. And so I'll jump in after he's done.
All right.
Well, let's let Steve do.
First
him
of all,
first.
although we don't necessarily need this information anymore tonight, the information on who's been awarded grants, which is on page 2, was part of the email exchange I was having with the state.
I have it on my phone.
We were originally contemplating last week at the end that Jerry suggested that we see if maybe we can back into this fire district information by first finding out who's already consolidated and gotten the money and what their situation was. I started out doing that while I was awaiting actual information from the state, and as I mentioned in an email, it wasn't looking very good because all of them had already been under some other form of fire administration, and so the issue we were facing wasn't really coming up for them. Luckily, as of today, with 2 separate exchanges, one initial response and one specific confirmation, that information is no longer important to us. It turns out that Subdivision 10 of Section 54 of the state finance law, which is the citizen empowerment tax credit, deals only with municipalities and says very clearly that the dissolution of a municipality qualifies the surviving entity for the grant, and that's regardless of what's happening with fire district. I also got that confirmed with with legal advisory information that their office uses specifically to answer that question that was provided to them, which is the part that's highlighted in yellow, which was, if you read the language I used when I wrote back to him, where I said that I need to be redundant to be very clear that there's nothing being reported ambiguously from me as a result of the initial email, and that's when the additional detail and confirmation and text was sent along. So basically what the other towns and villages that have been pursuing this process did isn't going to end up being relevant to what we may or may not do, because it doesn't affect the grant, and that's good news actually, because that was a big looming thing.
Right.
Now onto the matter of where obviously it's not within the domain of this committee to decide why the state in its infinite wisdom thinks that towns can't have fire departments. That's a whole separate matter that goes along with the millions of similar questions you could ask about the state, especially if you've been in the education end of it. Like a few of us, geez, like about half of us here have more. But nonetheless, what we actually have to work with. Susan's email and the things she got from CGR was essentially correct in one element of it, which was already contained. Their link that they provided was one I sent along about 2 weeks ago, without any specific explanation of it all. But it was explaining the different ways that you could go about doing this. I didn't type this part up because it's not necessary. Anybody who was around 3 years ago when the fire department itself last raised the issue, we came before the two boards with a PowerPoint that was for a joint fire protection district, also no longer relevant. That would have meant that a fire district would exist and that both the village and the town would belong to it. If we're now talking about a village dissolution. Now, if that had happened, we wouldn't even be going through this, but it's not relevant to what we're doing now, because since there aren't going to be two entities, the whole section in this link about joint fire district, joint fire protection district is of no use to what we do here. So the two things that are of use to what we do here is the actual traditional fire district with 5 elected fire commissioners and a separate taxing entity that then adopts a budget and it gets incorporated into the town budget without change, so the type we've discussed before. And the other thing that can be done, which is what Susan brought from CGR, which is
Steve, go back for a second.
the traditional fire district.
And that's a separate
Would
budget
be
that gets.
five fire commissioners
Right.
elected on a cycle, like the way a village
Right.
board is,
Like Highland.
like Highland has, and the commissioners set the budget and submit it to the town. It gets incorporated into and is billed as part of, but the town board itself can't make changes to the fire commissioner's
It's like a
budget.
sewer district line.
That's
line
that's the
item.
traditional
But
model.
it
The
has to
other
be
model we
but
could
it has
have.
to be voted on, doesn't it?
Not
No.
on the town
do their
level,
own.
No.
it's a,
Fairview.
It's
it's
its own
adopted in the
referendum.
fire,
It's a tax.
it's adopted in the district and it's passed through.
The
Fairview,
town is the
Arlington,
messenger.
No,
Yeah.
well, the town's a messenger in
You're-
the fire protection district too. I thought in a fire
No, the
district.
traditional
This-
fire
this
district,
different.
all you are is the collection agency.
Mhm.
You have nothing to do with anything
But
else that goes on
I
there.
always thought that the reason why people got scared of fire districts with the commissioners was they established their own budget, and then it went up for a vote, and that usually it was anytime they wanted it to be up for a vote, and then the only people who came out were the people who cared about it, and so it always passed, and therefore that's why people were nervous about fire districts.
That may be true, but that's a separate
It's not the
discussion.
point.
That's not the point of what
that's
he's
germane
telling you.
here is that
I
it's
I've been doing a lot of research, and I understand the fire protection district, which we'll get into.
Right.
Fire
I'm just
protection
confused
district is
about
different
fire.
from fire district.
so that's
I know that, I know, I
Yeah.
understand.
That's
I thought
one of the
I'm
two
trying to
choices.
clarify
Alright.
fire district, because I thought, I guess.
Let's not
okay.
get bogged down
Yeah.
here.
Second choice
Not getting bogged down,
is
It's getting
Steve,
clarification
go back
for
and
me.
the other
reiterate, will
model,
you?
the fire protection
The
district.
regular fire district is separate, a separate governmental body, if you will. 5 commissioners, they develop the budget,
They're
community
elected
votes,
in their own elections.
and they're elected in
like
their
a
own.
school board.
The community votes on the budget, yay or nay, it passes, and then the town
That's it.
And
is the
same is
collection
true for
agency.
capital expenditures.
Okay,
If
that's
you're
what-
gonna
that's
buy
what-
$1 million
that's what I
fire
thought.
truck on a
That's
what I
bond,
thought.
it's
I
gonna go
heard that
same
you
as a
don't
school
have
bond.
to vote on it.
No,
It's
no,
the same.
they
That's
vote.
why I was confused.
Yeah.
Okay, I thought you
And
said there was
you're
no
at the
vote.
town-
No,
Oh,
no
no, that's
town,
a
no
vote.
town
Oh.
board role.
Okay, no, but
Right.
the community
Community
votes.
votes.
Community
Right,
votes, but
okay.
there's
I thought you
no,
were saying there was no vote.
there's
by
no
the
town
community.
board role. It's just worth mentioning now that I reminded myself that capital expenditures like buying a new fire truck or building a firehouse is done by bond, by a permissive referendum, same as a school district. So
Right.
that
So
also,
the town-
also no town board
Mm-hmm.
involvement
The
whatsoever.
bottom line is, in this model, the town is the collection agency, period, the end.
Period. Okay.
Okay,
Next, second option, fire protection district. Fire protection district would be voted into existence by the town board. That this model is gonna be chosen would be something you could vote into existence without a referendum.
Except what I'll just say very quickly is because I went and got the fire contract so I could look at it. So let me just throw into the conversation, if Steve explains the fire protection district, the town already created a fire
Yes.
protection district. So we actually already have one that was created in 1951. So we have a fire protection district, embracing the territory in the town wholly outside of any city or
Right, but
village.
you'd have to expand.
So we
it.
just expand.
That's
So we don't
what
have
they
to go
did
through-
in one of
right.
these
So we don't have to
consultants,
go
they
through the process of
expanded.
creating it, we just have to
Right.
expand
But the reason you
Right.
created it in the 1950s
Was so
is so
we could-
that you could collect
That's
money
right.
from me,
Right,
so that I could go out and do this for free.
that's right.
So you could collect my money, because if
Yes.
not, the town outside the village would not have the ability to collect the fire tax.
Well, we can.
So that's why you have the fire protection
Right.
district
Well,
now, and why it doesn't include the village, because the village obviously taxes directly
its own.
for its fire budget.
Right.
Okay, so that being the case, yes, no, you don't have to form anything new, but you would have to
extend
vote
the
to
boundaries.
expand the
That's right.
boundaries to the,
Include the village.
to the
and
village.
you still have commissioners.
However,
No.
no, you would
No,
not
no,
have
no.
commissioners.
That's-
You would not have, basically what you'd end up with, long story short, is like the way Highland contracts ambulance service from Mobile Life, but with one really, really huge difference. Ambulances are allowed to bill the person they're serving. Fire companies are not. Okay, and so that means that privatization, if you will, which is really what this means, by contracting with us, New Paltz Fire Department, Inc., as I explained, that we also exist. We're a nonprofit, we're a fraternal organization whose mission is dedicated to training firefighters and providing them to our municipality for purposes, etc. So we already exist also. So from a perfectly legal point of view, you could ask the fire department to restructure itself to basically become a nonprofit fire protection providing agency like Mobile Life, but for
An
firefighters.
independent fire company.
As it says
Right.
in the text that was in the link that I sent 2 weeks ago and that CGR provided again, this is the critical paragraph. Contracts between a town and fire protection district vary in detail. Some simply name a price for protection. The trend is for town boards to convert fire protection districts to fire districts, placing these decisions regarding fire protection in the hands of independently elected fire commissioners. Now, what this is about, separating the naming of the price half of the sentence from what you ultimately end up having to do because of that part of the sentence, is that right now all of your firefighters live here in New Paltz, and we drive to the fire stations and get on the trucks, and that's really all there is to it. Okay, if you were to become a fire protection district and ask us to become your provider, we would now have to sit down as an organization and decide what we want to charge you for that. There would no longer be a budgeting process. That would be over. There would be no, and it would be a take it or leave it. You could say, but remember, if you decide that the price sounds too high and you want to leave it, what are you going to
Got
do?
no protection.
You're going to go to Tilson. You're going to go to Highland. Even if they would say yes, if you offered them enough money, they live much too far away. They
But-
can't
but-
solve your emergencies.
But in fairness, Steve, I mean, you're right. You're right in the sense that you create your own fire protection company. You know, you become your company. You put together your budget. You come to the board. You know, and then the town board adopts the budget and then contracts with you, and then we tax for it. But yes, it's true. In a fire protection district, you could, as a town, contract with whatever fire agency you want to give you fire services. So you know, I'm not saying we would want to by any means, but by the same token, I would like to believe that the fire department as it exists now, if you ended up becoming, well, I'll let you finish, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I'll
let me put it
I'll
to
let
you
you
this
finish.
way.
Will you remain
Let me
volunteer?
put it to you.
If they
There's
want
no
this.
there's no reason for me to do that. That's the most important question. Right now, I lose a
was
lot
your
of money.
question?
Right now, I lose a lot of money every year responding to calls. I pay for my own
Yes.
gas, you know, everything. I
Mount
pay.
Kisco, Steve, is an independent
I-
fire
I
company,
understand
and-
that. I
and
looked
it's
into
all
them.
volunteer,
I looked into
Okay.
them.
so,
You
Okay.
have to depend on the belief on the part of the people that you're contracting that the way they are handling the service is giving you the best fire protection possible. Now, just as an example, I don't know what their situation is, what they do to attract volunteers in their community. It's obviously a much more densely populated place. They have a much higher population from which to draw, and they also have a lot more people that can work close to where they live. We don't have any of that,
They have more than one fire company
okay? And they have,
in Mount Kisco.
right, so
yeah, but it is
You-
an independent fire company.
you can't
that contracts.
hope, you
More
can't
than
go into a decision like this hoping that when the information is clear that the trend is to not put yourself at the mercy of an independent fire company who will name a price and decide the structure and decide whether they want paid
Well,
people or
technically-
volunteers.
Okay, let's,
That you're hoping,
let's
let me just
finish.
finish, that you're hoping to be like Mount Kisco, like the one in the whole state, all right? You can't make a decision on the basis of that hope. You have to examine the detail of what you have here, what's involved. You have to actually look at all the stuff, like what's the average response time to the various kinds of incidents, what are the outcomes? I mean, this then turns into a very, very complicated thing. If it were to become in the interest of the fire department, if they could say to you honestly, not in an attempt like the Long Island fire departments did when they all became the subject of that Newsday series, by paneling their social halls. If we were to honestly say to you, look at the response time. If we don't pay people, your houses are going to burn down. You can't tell the people who just told you that they're wrong, because your only alternative is to try to contract with Highland or Tilson, or if you don't want to follow what they told you,
But why is that, I
Okay.
mean, why
you're
is that?
you're out of.
just a minute, let's go back.
I want
Let's
to.
just go process
I'm
one
talking
more.
about this because we have two possibilities
Right.
for how to structure a fire district now that we know that the grant money's not an issue.
Okay, but I wanna go back, cause I think we've gotten things a little muddy here. Fire district is very clear. Now we're talking about independent fire companies. Independent fire companies are constructed how?
They are a nonprofit. They're basically, it would be what you have now, with one key difference is that we would actually sit down and discuss amongst ourselves how much we want to charge you.
Okay.
And I shouldn't say we, by the way, especially since
Yeah.
the camera's running. Remember, I'm speaking when I say, they, the company, this entity doesn't
speaking
exist yet.
abstractly
I'm not an
now.
officer, and I don't actually
Okay.
speak on behalf of the fire department. That's not what this discussion's about. This is an administrative.
So an
discussion
independent fire
purely.
company, as opposed to a fire district, the voters have no say in who the elected commissioners are,
There are-
and they have no say in terms of yay or nay on the fire budget. In an independent fire company, if I'm understanding you correctly, and from what I've read, you set up your own 503C independent company. You're privatized, basically.
Right, it's privatized.
Yeah, it's a
and there's no
not-for-profit.
commissioners.
Right, it's a not-for-profit, privatized company who has its own appointed president, vice president, whatever
It's
the,
unknown what the structure of that
Yeah.
would be.
Okay.
Would the company elect internally, democratically?
Right.
What do the bylaws say? There would have
Right,
to be
exactly.
a
You have to-
procedure
you have
for
to
how
So-
that
operate under
happens.
C3
Steve,
status.
to take
Right.
this a little,
So-
keep the model going, so that it's very clear to people. Alright, so it's an internal decision who runs you, and it's an internal decision of what budget you are going to present that you believe. It's very similar to the rescue squad in that sense. The government has no say on what you believe their option. You present the budget requires X amount of dollars. Okay, the town board can say yay or nay. They can say, yay, we'll contract with you, or they can say, no, we won't, we'll go elsewhere.
With one critical difference. They can't actually say that. There's no elsewhere to go. If you don't like Mobile Life's rates, you can contract with another private ambulance service. They're all over the place, and they're not specific to where they live, because they will
No.
they will be waiting for calls at the office
Okay,
in
Steve,
their
that wasn't
locality.
Unfinished.
Okay.
That wasn't the finish.
In fire protection, the reason that it's so critical that people contemplate the distinction between the two types of fire districts is that, unlike with ambulance services, you don't get to say no because there's nobody else you can go to.
I mean, I wanna go a little further on that, but I wanna do that in a second, because I think that there are ways to make the fire protection district work based on the concerns that you're saying, okay? But just for the matter of distinction, because then I wanna sort of question you to sort of see why I think the existing structure is the same, okay? But let's just go back to your answer, Sally, for a question. Yes, a fire district, okay, gets created. It's got commissioners. They develop their budget. They elect their the voters elect the commissioners. The voters vote on their budget. The voters can vote the budget down in a fire district.
Oh, yes.
And so, in a way, you could be in the same situation that if it gets voted down, the firemen could say, screw this, we're not doing this, and they could also go away. So I think in any case, in any scenario, which is why I want to, okay, so the public can vote it down, okay? And then whether the fire district and commissioners bring back another budget and put it up for a vote, or they say no, or whatever, I don't know. That's a conversation I want to have. Right now, we're just talking structure. The fire district, they elect their commissioners, they put together their budget, the voters say yes or no, okay?
Both two commissioners and the budget.
Right, okay. The fire protection district, which was the one that Kyle was telling me, or Ken Gardner was saying, is how people now form moving forward, because a lot of people don't do these fire districts anymore, they do the fire protection district, is yes, you have a not-for-profit 501c3 fire department, which is a company, and then the town creates the district, which creates the boundaries, and then the town enters into a contract with the fire company, and the town, in essence, adopts a budget and levies it on the taxes.
That's correct.
So those are the distinctions. So if we're all clear with that, if it's
Hold
okay.
on, I have to interrupt for 1 second.
Okay, because then I want to.
There's been there's a mistake that was just said.
Okay.
It's the opposite of what they said. The trend is away from fire protection districts and canceling them and moving towards actual fire districts. And that is written, that's said not by me, but in the link they actually gave you
Okay. Then we have
when
to.
you asked for the link, because I printed it out, and
Well,
that's exactly what it says.
Well, I want to
Trend
see that
is
because
away
it was
from
actually Ken Gardner was the one who actually
I-
told
I
me the
know.
original. But anyway, regardless, well, we'll double check that, because Ken was the one who originally, when I called way before, when we were still working on the other thing, he was the one who had said to me, because I kept saying the fire district seems to be the stopping block for the community, and that's when he said to me, Susan, you don't do fire districts anymore, you do, and that's when I asked for this information and
Right,
stuff or whatever.
but it's incorrect.
I have 3 questions.
Yeah, well, maybe
Okay.
Susan's not done, and then.
I'm sorry.
Okay,
so
well, if it's
I'm
okay.
trying to jot down what she's saying.
It
Well,
really
I
doesn't.
actually really wanted to get more into the internal workings of both angles and why I think, in
That's what
essence-
my questions are.
okay, so then is it okay if I just continue then? Okay. In a way, Steve, what I'd like to sort of ask is, like, for the moment right now, under the current circumstances, the fire department's a part of the village government, your department, right? So you go to the village board and you work with the village board on a budget. Now you come to them with a budget, you would hope that they would adopt your budget because you're the experts creating the budget, whether, no matter under any scenario, whether it's a fire protection district or a district you're putting together, or a department, you're putting together the budget, you're going to the board, and you're negotiating with them to accept what you're recommending. If,
Basically, it's the
Right.
mayor's budget, but
Yeah,
okay, so in essence, whether it's a fire district and the voters vote it down, whether it's a town board sort of saying this is too much, or the current circumstance where the village board could say it's too much, we can't afford it, they could say to you, we don't accept your budget under any circumstance, and then at that point you guys could decide, you know what, we don't want to nickel and dime with them anymore, we're all quitting because we're all volunteers and we can't deal with this, and you walk away. What does the village do at that point? Probably have to go to a paid fire department or something. So I guess what I'm just trying to sort of say is, under any scenario, I think at the end of the day, you guys as because you can't create your budget and approve your budget and raise the money. You always have to go back to somebody, whether it's the town board, the village board, or the voters. So, so that's where I'm sort of disagreeing in the sense that if we did a fire protection district per se, there would be a problem, because I think the problem exists in each scenario. So in some ways, I think, it goes back to trusting your firemen and what they're doing, understanding it, trying to make it work, and then creating like budgets in a way that, like, one of the things that I saw from the research I did from some, I get Kyle and Kent. Kyle from the Department of State. He actually is a firefighter, and he is in a fire protection district, and the town contracts with them. What he said they do is they do like a multi-year contract, and in the contract they figure out like what kind of equipment that they need and how much they think when they're going to need to buy stuff and whatever, and that they then like they put like $20,000 a year into their operating budget, but the $20,000 is really to add, to just keep for equipment, so when they need to buy a fire truck, they've got the money for the fire truck and they don't have to go bond or whatever. So it's like they have this multi-year contract, and then they figure things in a way of what their costs are going to be, what they think, and then they also put in,
That's very similar to what we have now, Susan,
I
with the
understand.
town.
I know that. So,
yeah.
But that is an option of what you can do under a fire protection district.
No.
It's unfortunately, it's
Okay.
not really comparable, but
Okay, may I?
yeah.
And I don't care if you answer, some of them you may just say it's irrelevant. So my first question is, are there, do you know, any insurance ramifications for residents? Is if we have if our fire protection is in the form of a fire district as opposed to a fire protection district, does it have any consequence on homeowner insurance? Second, is there an effect on the provision of service or how it gets paid for the major sized, if you will, nonprofits like the school district or the college? Do we then have other, do we as residents have any more control over how much those kinds of organizations contribute to the costs? The third question is there any kind of record of municipal satisfaction with fire protection districts as opposed to fire districts? And the fourth question is, if you come as a fire protection district, if you come to the town with a cost for the services for the next 2 years, whatever it is, right now, if you need equipment, we can bond for the equipment. That's different from having this fee spread all over all of the residents who then have to pay taxes for it straight out. If there's a fire protection district, is the budget divided up in some way so that the town can still bond for major equipment?
Okay, that's a lot of questions, and try to go through them in order. Insurance ramifications come from something that's called your ISO rating. There is an agency. Oh no.
My ISO rating or
let's-
yours?
hold it.
No, the community's ISO rating,
Yeah, the community,
Has an
town and
ISO
village.
rating. and that drives
This is
the
a call
insurance
coming
costs.
in. It seems to be taking some time to announce itself, but you're about to hear a loud
Oh.
noise. Unless it was a glitch. Where's my voice? Where's my voice telling me what happened? Doesn't even sound like New Paltz tones. Never mind. I don't know why. These, just so you all know, as people who are administering fire service, when we say that these pagers and walkie-talkies and things, that we need the overhead siren because these things don't always work right, you just saw it happen. I'm set on A, which means vibrate New Paltz only, nothing else in the county, and I just got wall kill. So
I
when people start
sometimes-
talking about
I
turning the
sometimes
sirens
hear
off,
them
it's a
coming
bad
in
idea.
and say, "Oh, the sirens."
Because the
did
siren's
go," and
always
the
right,
siren
and the
doesn't.
radio is sometimes wrong, and that's a matter of
Okay.
public safety. Okay, but back to that was actually interesting that happened right there. The ISO rating is a private matter that's handled by researchers who go community to community and check that out. It has to do with things like where are your hydrants? Do you have any hydrants? If you don't have hydrants, where are your natural water supplies? Do you have enough tankers to do a tanker shuttle? How far flung is it? How much space between houses? How many square miles are you covering? Everything. There's a lot. There's a lot.
History
that
of
goes into it.
incidents, response
History
time,
of
to
incidents,
incidents,
response
property
time,
loss,
what kind of apparatus you have. Do you have a tower truck? If you have tall buildings,
we
blah,
have
blah,
a
everything. They rank it. They go through the whole thing.
It's a private sector business. It's a business that serves the insurance companies. So the
Right.
insurance companies have some idea of their risk.
Right. Now, if your ISO is going in the wrong direction, then yes, literally what that means is that people's homeowner insurance rates are going up in your community. And so, as I mentioned in one of my email communications, that's something that municipal officials really have to look at, because if you saved the taxpayer $50 a year per property by rejecting something that the fire department said you wanted because you didn't like how it looked financially, and then next year's ISO rating reflects that, and everybody's homeowner insurance goes up $51 a year for the $50 you saved them in the thing. No matter who's getting the money, they lost the money. They're $1 in the red because of your decision. So the idea of how you negotiate those kinds of things ends up being, unfortunately, much more complicated and with factors outside your control than you're currently aware of, because this all happens without any town government being aware of it.
The other
They're a private
questions bear
business.
upon, if
They-
I may just say this, the other questions bear upon the answer to the first question. In other words, if organizational experience with different organizational design produces different outcomes, then it'll be reflected in the ISO rating. But you can't presume that organizational design affects the ISO rating directly. It
Right.
affects it through the outcomes of the service.
Right.
It
Am I being
depends.
clear?
The answer to that is
Right.
it depends.
Right.
So I don't know of any data that shows that if you organize a fire district in one way or another,
It makes
You get
it
better
makes
It's
it
not
flat
an
out.
automatic
Okay.
consequence. Now, I have been in my travels, which I still engage in around the country, been in districts where the policy of the district is to actually aim for a particular. It's like LEED, you know what I mean? It's gold, platinum. They have a policy in place that we aim for this ISO rating, and they provide whatever budget and facilities and trucks they need to provide to their fire department to achieve that ISO rating. We don't have that operating here. Whatever the ISO does here kind of happens by accident. They don't come to your boards and report to you what they're doing. They're a private business. They handle themselves
Right.
privately, and they report to insurance companies, not to municipalities. So, but you eventually find it out. You can find out what your rating is. So that's some of the ways that different people handle the matter of the insurance. So the answer to your question is that no, nothing happens automatically because of one form of administration or another. It all depends on what happens with how you're
Okay, so
handling your
the
fire
way
So
the
service.
this is
service
not
is done.
relevant.
No.
Right.
I'm
No,
gonna
it's
say
not
that
relevant
out
to what we have to do here
Second
because
question.
it all depends. The second
But
question.
you should learn that your government should be paying attention to the ISO rating.
Right.
And whether or they're not, you
Regardless.
can ask a member of the village board.
We
And
have.
it's one of the things that's always bugged me over the last 10 years that I don't hear public officials talking about a whole lot.
But Sally knew what the ISO and she knew it was good, so that
Okay.
shows that
Okay,
she's
your
on top of
second
it.
question, I don't think I understood clearly, which had to do with do residents have more control over how the organizations contribute to the cost?
Well, for instance, right now, we're obligated to provide service, whatever the terms, to the school district, to the college, whatever. And we get from those organizations some amount of money as a contribution.
No, we
No,
don't.
you don't.
We don't get any?
No.
I thought that we got,
No.
No.
So-
It's a great question. The question is, if we organize in one way or another, can we make a
Well, that is my question.
Can we make a claim, an enforceable claim on not-for-profits or
No.
or government agencies?
No, not an enforceable one.
But
Right.
Steve, you
Definitely
could
not.
I don't know if
create,
we've
Check
asked,
that.
I don't know if we've asked the question, but it's certainly not anywhere in the documentation.
No, no,
With the
but we had
research.
this-
Great question.
We had it.
It
We
is a
had it.
question
We had
that
it come
brings
up.
me
when-
to a question
hold
I
on,
had.
when we did our research, which we did in the company of a very successful fire district organizing lawyer, that was one of the questions that came up, which is how do you require is there a way to require your non-taxable entities to pay a fire tax? And we did, and there was some information that almost made it look like you could, and then other information that seemed
This
like you
would be
couldn't,
more
and we
like
got
a
it.
fee than a fire
Yeah,
tax.
it can't be
You
charged.
call it a
We
tax,
checked
you
it
can't.
out.
The interesting question is, I don't.
The
I don't
college
know the
would
answer. The
actually-
interesting question is, you offer,
could create
or if you
fire
organize.
district of the college.
If
No,
the
we could- we
SUNY
could-
system,
No, we can actually create a
If
fire
you-
protection
Jerry
district that
has
doesn't
this
include
spark
college.
on
no, you
creativity
can't. The college
in his
exists.
face.
Last time I was
The
created,
college
we got into
exists
serious trouble.
entirely within the
Yes.
borders of your service district, which means you can't deny them service, you can't hold their feet to it and say we want some money, or you
But
can't.
it's a national movement to try to find ways to do what you're asking.
Same
And
thing
it's
with the
very
park.
hard.
We
But let
can't.
me point out here, that let me simplify the conversation. The conversation is there's a monopoly provider,
Right,
okay?
right. But if
Susan's
there is
saying
another-
there's a monopoly provider under all scenarios. Steve's saying there's a monopoly provider that's particularly problematic under one scenario. But all the cases, there's a monopoly provider. Under the hypothetical that if the fire district goes away for one reason or another, as a volunteer fire department, there are negative consequences, right?
Right.
There's no fire protection, or there's there's a potential to contract with other adjacent communities, but their response time is
Right,
not.
and then your ISO.
We'll have a
Yeah.
consequence for your insurance rates.
Not only
And-
that,
and
they
they may not be able to provide that.
They may
service.
not want to do it because if they're answering a call in New
So-
Paltz, it means they
So
can't
the
answer a
issue
call
is,
until.
the issue is,
but there has been-
in an environment of a monopoly provider, which structure is better?
Right,
Except for the
right.
fact
They're all monopoly
Or,
providers. situations.
or does it not make a
Yeah.
difference, I mean, or is that not
Although-
an issue?
although
But
there have
something
been-
like Park Point even, for
There have been
instance.
times when, though, the conversation has happened. I mean, obviously, nobody's ever taken it seriously, but there have been conversations of should, east of the Thruway, by Ohioville and stuff, contract with the Highland Fire Department. Should west of the Walkill, contract with Gardner. Should, Dub Road and up, contract with Rosendale. I mean, it's not like you couldn't take the town outside the village, turn it into all these different hamlets and stuff, and do other things.
If you
It's-
think a proposal like that's going to get people to vote for consolidation.
I'm not saying no. I'm not saying it is. I'm not saying it
No,
is
no,
or it
she's
isn't. But I mean,
speaking
I'm not saying it is or it isn't. I'm just
You're legally able to, but
Yes.
can they provide you adequate? Will they? They have to say yes. You can't just kind of
No,
have
but
the
you-
other side has
no,
to
but you
say
also-
yes.
yeah, of course,
Consultant's
but you're
not
also,
going
but
to
you're also,
say
but you're also
yes.
offering them money for a contract to.
We're getting
Right,
off
but if you're
track.
going to offer them enough money to induce them to do it not as well as your local people would have been doing it who live here, you might as well have given that money to your local people.
I'm not
It's
saying
a,
that
it's
you-
a,
I'm not saying that you wouldn't
Back
give
to
money
the
to local
question.
people. I'm just talking.
If we go, right now, the town has a fire district.
Fire protection district. The protection
Right.
word is
Okay.
critical.
but again, all that
And-
means is it's your form of billing. That's really all that
Right.
means.
The village,
your form of
because
levying
the
the tax.
village has the fire department. But just say we go either way. Okay, and we consolidate. The village then presumably would become a second fire district.
No, you just.
No,
probably-
you just
No,
incorporate in the
just-
fire
it's-
district.
You
You're
would
part of the-
just,
it's
you
part
would
of the-
just,
Just a minute, let
Come
me
in.
finish what
Okay.
I wanna say. You could create town outside fire district, within the village fire district. Could you then also create a fire district that incorporates the college into a third fire district?
you can't,
When in
the
in other words,
college,
it's a structuring question. I'm
Why would you
asking.
gain?
Yeah, there's
No.
a difference
What would you
between
gain?
protection
No,
Why
and
would you
you
want it? What would
can't.
you gain by doing that?
Fees.
you can't.
Can I help? I might be able to help with this a little bit, because I had this when I was in Pine Plains with the ambulance corps. They were volunteer ambulance corps.
Okay.
And they came to our football games, in case something happened, and we wanted to actually pay them some money, at least for the gas or something. And there's a state law that since they're volunteer, there's a state law that prohibits a school district, and it's probably the same thing for SUNY, from paying them money. It's considered a gift of public funds because we don't have to do it.
Well, and that's-
Therefore, we couldn't do it. We
Well-
checked that with our attorneys and with the state.
Well, I will challenge that. SUNY
But
actually,
there are
SUNY
colleges-
gives, wait a second, SUNY gives gas to the New Paltz Rescue Squad.
gives it or sells it?
It's a
Yeah, so
volunteer.
they
it's a-
it's a volunteer, it's a,
And they also don't
it's-
give it, so that's not an issue.
No, no,
here.
he's
Like
saying-
the
he's
fire
saying-
Well, I don't know.
he's saying
SUNY may
fire
be different.
department-
he's saying SUNY
Okay,
can't, and
but
I'm saying
SUNY
SUNY
I don't
does.
know.
all
Yeah,
over the
school
state,
districts, I know,
SUNY
yeah.
does.
all over the state, all over the state, where every SUNY branch is located, anything that is coming from the state campus to the local fire department is entirely voluntary and case by case. There is no law at all that allows you to actually bill the college separate from the rest of your municipality or anything else, not just the college,
But
there's-
anything.
yeah,
There is
answer.
a tiny exception. There's a couple of places in the Adirondack Park where their service district is literally about 200 people in a tiny hamlet and then like 7,000 acres of parkland. And the state, on a case-by-case basis, has allocated impacted area funds similar to like what happens around military bases. But it's not a blanket thing. It's handled
it's not required.
one case at a time. It's not required, but without enabling legislation, and we certainly wouldn't qualify for the kind of things that the state has allowed, because it's just not set, we're not set up that way here. We're not that remote. You absolutely cannot go to anything within your entity and treat them as separate from the general.
So
Rick's
let me
gotta
understand
go.
this. The real decision is, are you gonna do you think it's more desirable to contract with an entity that is a not-for-profit corporation that brings its demands to you, financial demands to you? Or is it better to have an entity governed by an elected body that brings the outcome of its budget process to you?
Right.
Which is
Well,
the better option?
That's-
Is that the question?
That's one of the
That's the
questions is
question.
actually that Ellen was asking. Again, without having gone and researched an actual list of who they were and then talked to all of them about what the issues were that made them do it. The advisory information from the state of New York is that the trend is away from fire protection districts and that towns that have them are giving them up and converting to traditional fire districts. So obviously the kinds of issues that I'm talking about actually manifest themselves.
Okay.
But before we get
But
into
no,
it,
no,
Unfortunately, I have
But
a
I-
meeting
I-
in
it just
Kingston,
contradicts
so I
it.
have to
Rick,
take off.
Okay.
do you have an overall sense of which way we should go with this?
As far
Fire
as the
district as opposed to a, independent fire company?
I kind of have, I'll say a third thought, which is leave it up to the consolidated government to decide. That the committee doesn't need to make a
that is
recommendation either way.
much too big of an unanswered question
Yeah,
for people
I
to
don't
go
think
into the
they'll be able
ballot
to
with.
answer.
Okay.
Well, I
That's,
don't think-
that's like a guaranteed no.
Well, I
When
don't
you
necessa-
put
I
that,
don't
tell
necessarily
people
know
we're
if I
leaving
wanna-
fire
It'll
protection up
take
in
them
the air.
3 years to decide whether.
But I would
Yeah.
rather us not be forced to make that decision yet, and I think we should, on a lot of things, figure out the strategy of how we're gonna make any decision. Right now, we're fact-finding for the moment, and we can
Right.
give our opinions, but I don't wanna.
I am going to disagree with you, Susan. The whole purpose of this committee
I-
was sent back to make some recommendations in light of what happened with the state, to make some recommendations to the joint board.
Sally, I didn't say.
Excuse me, the decisions as to what you recommend or don't recommend to the voters is not this committee's job, it's the joint board's job. So we can advise in a preliminary way, we think that the two boards should present a consolidation vote, and some of the things within that consolidation vote are, we recommend a fire district as opposed to an independent. So that is what we are doing, and that is what we're going to do.
Sally, I wasn't saying that I didn't think we should. I just don't know if we're ready from one discussion today, right now, to make that
We're
decision.
not gonna conclude this
Because,
today.
no,
No
but
question
but the
No,
fact that
but
she
there
asked,
Nor
was-
should
it-
we.
but she
But
asked that question.
But
and-
Rick has has experiences with fire districts, which,
Mhm.
and fire companies, which would help us. So,
Um,
he is a member
as
of
far
the
as,
committee.
just to let people know about the matter with fire commissioners, there was, and fire protection districts actually, but two things have come up recently a little bit south of us, further down in Hudson Valley. There are certain areas south of us that, due to their demographics, have people who get elected to positions because of particular voting block concentrations. Down in Muncie, they just actually, the fire commissioners just voted 3-2 to turn off their overhead alarm, even though, as you all just witnessed right now, the radios don't consistently work. And that is because in their community, they have a situation in which they can consistently elect school board members or fire commissioners or anything that aren't necessarily going to listen to the fire chief or the school superintendent or the firefighters, and they're having a big dust up down there in Muncie right now because their alarm got turned off by a 3-2 vote. So it doesn't always work out that what the fire department says they want is what the commissioners grant. It all depends on how, if some little group here just got fed up with the way fire budgets are running away, you could easily organize an election and elect 2 new fire commissioners and turn the whole thing around. That's one thing that the democratic process actually does give you. Just, in fact, the fact that in some places, you know, only 70 people show up for a fire bond vote, like over a fire truck, is exactly what makes it possible for you to easily defeat them. The reason that it doesn't happen so often is because people just don't pay attention. People just don't care. But if you do something that's going to make them care, like a middle school bond for $50 million,
Well, I think
suddenly,
the Gardner Fire District,
and
what, 5
that was a
years ago
perfect
was
example.
a perfect
But Muncie
example.
will show you now another thing about Fire Protection District, about the risk, which is what is the name of this little village down in Orange County? I just played a gig last summer at their summer outdoor festival. It's like a miniature county fair. We have the news article posted on our bulletin board downstairs. They actually just had their they just had their fire department split in half. The people who lived in the town outside the village felt that they didn't like the way the village administration was treating them as firefighters, and the people in the town outside the village didn't like the way that the village board was handling the fire department that they were contracting with, the same way that you now contract with her, and they actually split in two. This is not an isolated case. They're now scrambling down there trying to figure out how to reorganize a town fire district that's now going to be separate, and they siphoned off a lot of firefighters from the village, existing village fire department. This is chaos. One thing you absolutely, I can't emphasize this strongly enough. If there's one thing I knew instinctively, but certainly have had reinforced to me in a way that makes me lose sleep at night as somebody whose pager is going off, is that this just isn't like anything else. Okay, if something goes wrong in your fire department, someone's gonna die. If they don't die, their house and all their possessions and their life's memories are gonna burn to the ground instead of just losing the living room where the fire started in the fireplace. You can't have this. You can't have this. To even have it questionable in the minds of the public about what you're gonna be doing with the fire protection is a guarantee that there will not be a vote for a dissolution. You have to really care about this. Like I said to Susan, we're not going to decide this tonight. This isn't a fact-finding session. And I wouldn't even recommend, the opposite, I would totally not recommend trying to move towards consensus on which of these two models tonight. That's not the point.
Well, we also agreed that we would talk, once we have discussed all these options, that we would, a subcommittee of this committee would go and speak with the fire company.
Right, but some of that stuff isn't necessarily the stuff you're going to get from the fire company. The fire company would only be telling you, you know, first of all, the idea of a fire protection district would be totally new to everybody downstairs. That would require them to get together.
Okay.
No, because with two entities, the only kind of district that we were ever looking at was joint fire district. Joint Fire Protection District is actually the full name of what it's called. So no, this would have to be new. They'd have to get the lawyers down. They'd have to talk to other private companies like Mount Kisco that contract to as private entities and see, you know, like it would take a lot of time for the fire department to even prepare a response to you on this particular question. It's never been thought of before.
That you said that the trend is moving away from fire protection.
And I got to interrupt you
Right,
just
and
because.
that's just a piece of
Why?
summary information.
Well, no, but I got to interrupt him before he says that, only Steve, because when I forwarded you, Jerry, Kent's stuff that I
Yeah,
owe
he
to
said
him.
the contrary thing. so
That's the
somebody's
point, well,
wrong.
that's
But
why
he
I-
also sent a link that contained
But-
this quote that I excerpted.
Which is why I want to see it.
Who's
which is
looking
why-
at what?
Well, which is why I want to see it, because right here from Kent, he answered Jerry's comment and said, Jerry, the fire protection district, capital letters protection, because that's the distinction, the fire protection district can contract with a city, village, or fire district, and in parentheses, the bad kind, or with an independent fire company. And so, that's why I knew about this third way, because he was so specific to tell me to look into it, which is why I went
But
back and
this is-
called him to say, explain this to me.
I answered immediately in email. This is clearly not the position of
Well,
a
we-
fire provider. This
well,
is the position of a
I think what we need to do,
of a
is
consultant
go
on municipal
back.
administration, and I would actually like to talk to him personally to
Did you
try to
agree with
find
that?
out what he's getting at, because he'd have to be
Well, he
much
actually
more
has a
specific.
guy on his staff who knows a lot about this. He
Yes,
doesn't-
there's
He
right, but there's
he
two.
doesn't know that much about it.
There's two kinds of fire districts within the thing he's calling the bad kind of fire districts. There's the kind in Long Island that inspired the Newsday series, the infamous Newsday series. And then there's everybody else. And as far as what you perceive as what's happening with the current village model, which is a single provider, that is true, versus, say, the Highland model, the closest fire district to us, and the other ones that we have, is, and we recommended this 3 years ago, but unfortunately neither the town nor the village board actually did it. Get their budgets, divide it by how many calls they answer, and don't include medicals because that doesn't count. We don't have that here. We have separate rescue. And compare what people in New Paltz are currently paying per fire call in their fire tax to what your neighboring communities are paying, and you would see that once you start working out the budget numbers, another thing to consider is that this change in consolidation from coterminous to consolidated town is going to require that you acknowledge that your fire budget on a per call basis is going to be more in line with what our neighbors are paying, which is a lot more than we're paying, a lot more. And so you're going to have to really do a lot of math to be able to show the people of New Paltz aggregate that this consolidation is actually going to save them money, because the fire district question by itself can change that dramatically into a situation where it's going to cost the taxpayer. Separate from the village-town disparities in rates and how you'd work that all out, it's just the matter of the fire district is going to need its own budget analysis based on the budgets in our surrounding communities, and you have to honestly appraise what the new tax bill is going to be for everybody, based, because it's really, and you know this, Sally, and I'm not saying this from your side of the table, I'm saying it from my side and also as a taxpayer. The only reason that we pay so little for fire in New Paltz is because we're a village fire department.
That's right.
The village fire department, from a cost perspective, is the best model.
Yep.
Just from a money perspective, it is the best model. It doesn't necessarily provide the best administration. It doesn't necessarily even provide the best protection. But you are going to lose the guaranteed best financial model when you give up the village fire
But
department.
that's true, Steve, in the whole,
Could we, if none of this was being raised, would we simply be going on as we are for?
Well, that's a whole separate discussion, and I would have that discussion with you in a different kind of forum. That's not.
But if
Really,
I,
really,
but if I
this
heard
is
what you, but
not
if I
really
heard you
the-
just say, if I'm correct, you basically said, okay, let me say, if we were to create this new model and move forward to try to do consolidation, create this new fire protection district, fire district, whatever, we're gonna get more, I don't wanna say professional in the sense of a negative connotation, okay? But we're gonna be getting better, more costly, but better fire protection, because you basically just said with the village form, we're getting the cheapest, not necessarily the best.
Okay, only if you think that
If that's
people
what I
in
heard- I heard
Riften or
you
Tilson or Highland have better fire
No, I'm
departments
just saying
than
what you
do,
just,
and
no,
I-
no,
Wait,
I'm
I
just,
don't understand.
what you just said.
I didn't
Question
hear it
that.
that way.
what I heard you
Because I
say.
say they
I
don't.
didn't, I
Well, that's
didn't.
why
that's what he said.
No,
No, well, that's why I'm
that's not
trying,
what I
that's why I'm
said.
trying to quantify,
That's
because
not
I
what I
heard you
said.
say that the village fire department model right now
The
is the cheapest.
negotiated budget that comes from the mayor and gets adopted by the village board, that's negotiated on an annual basis, is the most cost effective for the taxpayer.
But
That's
I
a very
Yeah.
narrow
Right.
Yes,
I need,
But then why could-
observation.
I need
It
to say
doesn't cover
something.
any of your other questions.
But that also is
But then why
very
could-
heavily dependent, it seems to me, on the dedication and the goodwill of the volunteers who man that department.
Well, that would be true even if you had a fire district,
Mhm.
because unless they're hiring paid professional firefighters, they're still going to depend on the skill and the availability and the willingness and the training of the people who are volunteering. What's involved in keeping a volunteer fire departments adequately staffed is a very broad subject and not one for this.
okay,
Not one, but I would be happy to discuss
But
with
what you-
anybody
but-
privately as a separate matter.
Okay, but what you said is the inherent problem of a fire district, why people are scared of a fire district. And why whatever you would talk about dissolving the village, and it always came back to the fire department, you can't have a volunteer, you know, and everything. You're saying because the village board negotiates the contract with you guys, we're getting a really good department taking care of our community at a cost that's effective for the taxpayers because of the relationship between the village board and the fire department. Okay?
and the
If you-
town can never have that.
No, yes you can, but Sally, yes you can by having a fire protection it's just for a moment, wait a second, just for a moment, okay? By having a fire protection district, okay, you still have the same guys, but they're now incorporated as a C3, okay? So they have their own entity now. They're still then talking to the town, and the town's got to adopt their budget and then tax. So it's really not that different to an extent, okay? What always scares people with a fire district, okay, is innately the fact of the fear of an exponential cost in the fire budget, because now you've got the firemen determining their budget, and if you believe you need more, why you're not coming to the village with more, I don't know, but maybe you think you can. But people have an inherent thought that with a fire district, now you're going to say, well, we really need this stuff, and now we have control, so we can put what we want. You put it up for a vote, and the only people who come out to vote are the people who care about the fire department, because nobody else is paying attention or cares. And so therefore, whatever budget you guys want gets passed, and then before you turn it around, there's a brand, there's a fire budget that, it might be what you need, but, there's a big fire budget that, people feel they don't have control over. And so people are scared of fire districts, which is why when I learned about the fire protection district, it was like, oh my God, here's a way that we could look at creating, a town government, if that's what we should choose to do, and not have to be afraid of a fire protection district, because there's still somewhat of control from the governing body that has a relationship, so people are not as afraid.
Okay, I'm gonna disagree with you, and I'm going to
That's fine,
say,
you can-
anytime the voter gets to vote on something, that is far better, in my opinion, than a fire protection district, which is dependent upon
What's
five
that-
people who may or may not be paying
Sally, what's
attention
that
to
different than
money.
what you have now?
Excuse, would you,
Okay.
you got to say what you want
Okay,
to
I
say.
just don't
I
understand-
get to say what I want to say. And that is, all right, so the fire department, the fire district, what do we call it, a fire district? They put their budget together and they nominate commissioners, and I have the right, and I'm not excusing people who do not exercise their right. I have the right to go and vote no. I do not have that kind of involvement in a fire protection district. And that is and what the fire department and the way the village and the fire department negotiate is the fire department is a part of the village. In a joint fire protection district, the fire department is not a part of the town. It is an independent body that presents its budget, nobody votes on the organizational structure of a protection fire district at all.
I have a solution.
What?
I have a solution.
Okay.
Well, there is no solution.
So,
Is there any way to design whatever we're having, fire district, fire protection district, whatever it is, in a way that says that by town law or whatever, the commissioners or the officers are the same people as the trustees?
So you're saying like with the police commission, what we did with that, you would make for the
I'm
fire?
No,
I think
right
it-
now,
I
the
think-
village board,
Yes.
we are the fire commissioners,
Okay.
okay?
Right,
In a town,
that's state law.
the town board is
You
not.
can't.
You can't
Unlike, no,
at
you
all.
can't.
What about
You
in a
can't.
fire protection district, in the 501c?
You can't. You
Okay.
cannot.
Oh, well,
If
okay.
in the
Only
alternate
in the
model,
village.
in the fire protection district model, you do not have fire commissioners. It is literally the mobile life
Okay,
system.
too bad.
Okay, and let me just throw something out here
But wait a
that
minute,
somehow
Steve, wait a
hopefully
minute.
will
So
bridge.
Just wait a minute with that analogy. The people would be the same people, right? Presumably, the current people in the volunteer fire department would be the same people in the not-for-profit. And they'd
Yes.
still be living here. What makes you think that they would hold up the community inappropriately?
This is not inappropriately. This is exactly where I was about to go. I was trying to bridge your two statements, your two positions, and I'm gonna again. This time I'm literally, without even using it as a disclaimer, I'm speaking for myself, but I also am speaking from a position informed from literally hundreds of other firefighters that I circulate with, because I'm lucky enough to be the Ulster County delegate for us, and I go all over once a month, all over the county, and hang out with everybody. There's a psychology in volunteer firefighting that you don't find in police work, that you don't, because they're professionals and it's a career. There's a psychology to it. There's a history to it. You've all seen situations, particularly back when Terry Dungan was mayor, where you've gotten to witness right in front of you just how delicate that whole framework is and what the psychological component of it is. I put an excerpt in here about this just happened, a volunteer fire department. The community of Thorsby is currently without its own fire department. On Tuesday night, nearly 20 volunteer firefighters stepped down there from their positions in a show of unity after the fire chief was let go. Troy Much, president of the Canadian Volunteer Fire Services Association, says the daily rate for this coverage is $625 an hour. He's talking about what they're having to pay to get stopgap professional service while they try to figure out how to get their volunteers back, which comes to $105,000 a week and represents roughly 85% of the department's annual operating budget. 1 week. 85% of their former annual. The Thorsby firefighters have not changed their stance, saying they will return to active service once Fire Chief Norm Osnes is returned to active duty. Everything that happens in every community that has a volunteer fire department happens because the firefighters desperately want to be there. It's not like we can take it or leave it. We can't. You've all seen the amount of abuse we can take and not turn in our pagers and walk out. It is, we all desperately want to be doing this. That doesn't mean that we want to become a business that manages and bills fire protection. That changes our psychology into something completely different. Right now, I'm a resident of New Paltz, and I look at every person who lives here the same way I look at my own children. That siren is going to go off and someone's in trouble. It's like being a grown-up Boy Scout. It's like, it's the greatest thing. No, it's true. You got 3 Eagle Scouts downstairs. It doesn't matter how old we get. It's a psychology. If you were to alter us into being a new kind of entity where we had to be a self-interested business rather than this Benjamin Franklin to today tradition of the selfless community servant responding to need, I can't predict to you what will, you can't discount this, because you see fire departments will walk out. If you alter the psychology, you don't know what's going to happen with the way the service is getting provided. People are going to have new motives. They're going to say, oh, well, now that we can bill for what we do, let's take a look at tinkering with this, do this, and then suddenly I'm thinking like, well, gee, I have to work at some job I hate just so that I could have the time to answer fire calls, but I'm not even allowed to leave my job to answer fire calls because my employer won't let me go, and this is compromising fire protection. So I think what we need to do is we need to all get paid so that we're actually being paid to sit there and answer fire calls instead of working at McDonald's and not being able to answer fire calls. Once you start making your firefighters concentrate their thoughts on questions like that, they're no longer being pure firefighters. They're now also having to adopt a bit of a business mode into how they think, and it doesn't make it negative in any way. I really resent the fact that a guy used the word the bad kind of fire district. That's exactly how the trouble starts, when smart people think they can distinguish between bad fire districts and good fire districts when they've never, you know. And when firefighters hear people talking like that, that's when what happened in this article excerpt happens. They're like, well, we only do this because we love it, and if that's the way you're going to talk about us, or, you know, then
But then, Steve, what you're
I'm going to
saying-
save my gas and get 8 hours of sleep every night and leave my pager on the desk, and that's the end of me. So you can't. The psychology is delicate. You don't want to start messing with new forms of psychology.
Okay, so then what you're saying to me, okay, is I don't even know why we're having this discussion, because then basically doing a fire district or a fire protection district, either way, it's creating a new form of way of we're looking at fire services. We're creating one way is a fire district where you have your commissioners and you're independent and you put together your budget and you take it to the voters. The other way is you become a not-for-profit, but you work with the town. And so either way, you're changing the model. So you're saying you have to stay a volunteer fire department under the village government because it works and that's what makes you guys feel comfortable and you're part of a community. So why are we having this conversation?
That's
Well, no, that's not what I
she's
said.
saying
That's
at
not what
all.
makes us comfortable. What I'm saying is that going with fire commissioners who are elected is much closer to the village
volunteer
system
fire. That's what
for
it
the
is.
volunteers than asking us to become a self-interested business.
Yeah. That's,
That's
what
all,
he's trying
because we're
to
still dealing with
differentiate.
5 elected officials. They decide the budget, not the fire chief, not the firefighters. You know, so it's much closer. It's just that they're independently elected rather than the village board having the role of being
And
fire
if we
commissioners.
could do a statutory change,
So-
which somebody set up in Albany to me the other day, if we could do a statutory change that allows.
Look, yes, the
So it'd be
obvious
about
answer is
50
why did we said this an hour ago? Why does the state not let towns
Well, that's
have
what
village-style fire departments? Who the heck knows? But we can't fix that.
That's what Rick Linden,
we can't.
before you arrived,
Of course,
that's
that would
what
make
Rick
sense. You would have
recommended.
to agree.
It's historic, it's just a historic anomaly. That's all.
It's,
But you
it's got
can't,
some kind of institutional momentum. It's not
very
going to
hard to change,
happen.
a lot of people are invested.
All right.
And
one-
I don't know,
Now-
and I don't know, I can't answer this. All I know is Bob Megna, who's the governor's budget officer, who I was with at the Association of Towns. And we had a long talk afterwards because they talked all about the freeze, and then he talked all about consolidation. And, you know, they're shoving consolidation down communities' throats, and they're basically saying we've got $39 million and nobody's taking advantage of it. So I was luckily, you know, called on, and I proceeded to give my opinion about the fact that there are communities that are trying to do their hardest to try to make this work. And as far as we're concerned, every time we turn around, it's the state that's standing in our
That
way.
is correct.
In our way,
That
okay?
is
And I
correct.
said that publicly, and I said that to Bob
Right.
Becker.
They're the
and
ones that want you to
and
do it,
Dee
but
Dee-
they're
and
the
Dee Dee,
ones that are
who's the
standing in your way.
commissioner, you know, who's the commissioner,
Isn't
you know,
that
for the
always the
Department of
case?
State, turned around and thanked me and said, I really helped him. Bob Becker said, Susan, please call. I really need to talk to you. And he said to me afterwards that, Susan, maybe there's something statutorily that we can do to help you guys move forward. Let's talk. So I don't know statutorily what you can and can't do. I don't have a clue.
Well, I
This
All I
brings me-
know is
Two small things that I was just going to touch on because they're relevant to what we're talking about, but it's starting to move in a different direction. First of all, one thing to consider is what Pete Healy said 2 meetings ago, which is that if we continue doing our research and find that this is kind of really messed up now that we can't do coterminous, that maybe the best move is to kind of like put everything into a holding pattern while you see if you can get Albany to meet you part way and actually help you do the things they say they want to pay you money to do. That's number one. I wasn't really with where Pete was 2 meetings ago when he brought that up, but as I look deeper into the potential budgetary issues and other matters that pertain to the new form of consolidation, it may be that legislative action is going to be the best way to go, because you all know that once you put up the vote, if the vote fails, The state requires a minimum of 4 years, but we know realistically it's really gonna be more like 20 before you can visit it again, if at all.
I mean-
So if the best paths, it does seem to be the Pete Healy approach, then that's something we should consider. And two, stay with me for just one more moment. All does not seem to be lost, even if this stuff seems to turn into insurmountable obstacles, because the website pertaining to the Citizens Empowerment Grants explains several other scenarios of services consolidation that also reward you with permanent tax credit money if you are not able to accomplish a full entity reduction. So, as I said the first time I came here about coming up with a new plan B other than status quo, I started researching other things that will get you grant money even if you don't manage to dissolve the village. So all is not lost, even if it appears to be lost, because you can go to the Pete Healy model, and while you're waiting for the Pete Healy model to take wing, and it may or it may not, but you don't just sit around doing nothing while you're waiting to see if lobbying can help solve these problems, because you can actually affirmatively do department mergers, water, highway, and things that will get you credits, that will get you
We did that in
grants in lieu of the consolidation grant while you wait to see if something better can be offered to you.
Because that's a use
So I want to
paid,
leave
so
that.
leave water out.
Yeah, well, whatever. I'm just saying you have other ways to get state money
But you know what, we already.
while you're waiting
But
for the
Steve-
legislation you need.
That is
So
something.
all is not lost. That's all I'm saying.
Well, having
We lost Peter though.
some of us,
He was gonna provide us with all this information, and Peter hasn't been to 2
Well-
meetings.
well, there,
Cameras are on.
I know, I know the camera.
some
I
of
won't
us
talk
have
about that while
invested a
cameras
lot
are
of
on.
time in this, and some of us are newbies. We spent 2.5 years looking at this whole big picture, which is why we recommended a village townwide.
And the fire department was on the
Or
list of
townwide
reasons you gave for
village,
that, right? You
and
all worked this
that's
out.
right.
So this isn't
So-
really news to you.
No,
So
And
we
so-
can't do what we prefer.
unless we
Well,
get two.
Actually, that's not true.
Unless we get John Bonasek and Kevin Cahill to introduce home rule legislation which allows us to do it.
No, actually, we can do it. We chose not to for the moment. And if I remember differently than everybody, please correct me, okay? Our goal was to have the entire community to be able to vote on whatever government we chose. So it was a townwide village concept, which is what we were looking to do. We wanted everybody to vote. The only way to accomplish the vote on a townwide village concept was for the village to vote. It was for the town outside the village, residents to vote if they want to be annexed into the village. Once they vote to say, yes, we want to be annexed into the village, then the town outside the village and the village residents, do we vote, do we want to be a town or a village? That was the only option other than the village residents voting to dissolve and becoming a town. We were told by the governor's office, try to go get home rule from Assemblyman Cahill and Senator Bonasek, allowing both communities to vote. And Senator Bonasek got it passed, Assemblyman Cahill didn't carry it, and then we stopped.
That's right.
And we stopped. We stopped only because we chose not to go down that road.
There's a
That road.
significant opposition by the mayor, which had something to do with it.
Understandably, I know that. But what I'm just
I
saying
don't
is,
think he was the biggest influence over Kevin.
Well, it has to be said, and it has to be said 100 times.
And
Well,
so-
wasn't-
and the mayor and others who supported his point of view.
okay, so it was a combination of the mayor and them, and it also has to do with the fact that the Assemblyman happens to like villages also, and has a fondness for villages and doesn't necessarily want to dissolve villages.
I don't think so.
Well, he stated that to Dan Torres, that he did his dissertation on villages, and he believes in villages.
He said he did this dissertation on it, but I don't think that was necessarily a statement on why he chose to do what he did with the home rule
Well, he
legislation.
did say, well, he did say.
Believe me, I know Kevin for 35 years. He has no particular fondness for villages or any form of government.
Okay, well, okay, so.
So he's an anarchist, you say?
So anyway,
Listen to me, he has no particular fondness for one or the other form of
I
government.
know.
okay,
I'm
so
joking.
we, okay, so regardless, whatever, we chose to walk away from doing that. Not that we can't. We chose not to go down the road that would allow us the opportunity to possibly have this.
I don't know about you, Susan, but I don't think anybody chose it. We were forced to stop.
We weren't forced to stop.
We were forced to stop.
We were not able to accomplish having the entire community have the ability to vote, and so we
So-
stopped, and we all decided to take a breather, and we decided to let the temperature of the community drop down, whatever, and others of us got busy and worked on other things. One of the questions I said to Kyle today, because I followed up today, because you had asked me to get in touch with him, and I had a long conversation with him, and I commented about the fact that one of our goals was how to have the entire community to vote, no matter what we do. Because even if we become a town, it's the village that has to vote to dissolve, okay? What he did say to me, and I don't know
Or
if I have,
conversely.
I don't know if I have the answer per se, he did say that under this citizen empowerment legislation that the governor changed and amended, that at one time when you talked about consolidation, you have dissolution or consolidation. When you talk consolidation, it was consolidation of a town to a town, a village to a village, because they treated town government and village government separately. But under this, the way they talk about it, they now treat town and villages the same,
That's correct.
okay? So
That statute passed?
well, yes,
When
but
was it passed?
That's,
this is a governor's
this is
amendment.
this is 17A.
It's 17A.
Okay, so.
And the way it's phrased, he said nobody's challenged it. So, okay, consolidation, there's a phrase, there's something in here, Jerry, I can show you, but it basically, lets towns and villages consolidate together. And so the way they frame it, they don't distinguish them as being separate governments. So it's now town and villages can consolidate. And so the way it's phrased, he said that, so he did say to me, let me see if I can just, I typed up my notes so I could share them with you. So give me a second.
According to that, Jerry, you never ever have to do the annexation disincorporation process. That allows either by petition or by the two governments to decide that they will
Yep.
consolidate,
So he said,
and that they will consolidate if they wish as a town or as a village town-wide, which is what this committee recommended. And
So what's
Where-
the new information?
so this is
well,
what he's-
this is Linda Kingsley saying that the whole thing was wrong and that we had to go through an annexation process and a disincorporation process, and that's where
Let
it
me
got
ask you,
bogged
did
down.
Magna at the town meeting, did Magna say, we have studied our experience and we now know the following things,
no, what he did was, what he
because they haven't studied it. They
I-
failed for 5 or 6 years to get their goal, and they don't know what the hell happened.
I understand that, which is why when the governor, when Megna stood up
Right.
and talked about the freeze, then talked about consolidation, with $39 million, nobody's doing this, nobody's doing this, nobody's doing that, that's why I got up and I gave it right back, and I was really upset, and I said, with all due
Well, they have
respect,
statewide experience.
and
It
so
hasn't happened
that's why he
except
said,
in.
that's why he said to me,
Why?
that's why he said to
What's
me,
the reason?
People outside
I
waiting.
agree, so that's why he
Yeah,
said to me,
there's two
Susan,
meetings.
let's talk,
You don't want me to
what you're
speculate
saying
on
is
that.
really important. So when I stood up and I said publicly, this is what we've done. We consolidated building grounds and water and sewer within the town, and only by the luck of the fact that we have a highway superintendent who's willing to do both jobs, but the day he decides he doesn't want to do it, we're back to having to separate, okay? But we've saved 200,000 by, and I went through all the stuff we've been doing and talked about all the headaches that we've had. And that's when he said to me, Susan, let's talk, maybe there's something statutorily we could do. We haven't talked yet, and I'm hoping for us to be able to get this to the
Let
next
us
level.
invite
But
him
let me,
down.
okay, so let me just
Well,
let me
Magna's
just,
not gonna come to it.
he won't come to it, but we can maybe go up to him. Let me just finish what he did say today.
He's recently happily remarried.
I
as a
have to
young
leave
man. He goes
everybody
home.
with.
He just got
with a
married?
thought.
Jerry, just let me finish.
Leave
Can
A
I,
little
All
baby.
right, but
can I
this is,
I want to just finish the comment that they said when to get to, can we both vote, okay? So what Kyle said to me today, and this is not a definitive answer, okay? And he's going to check with the lawyers within, okay? And he said I should try to call Linda. He did say, in the reorganization language for 17A, the language treats the town and village the same, where before it was treated as separate governments. It may be possible that the town board and the village board can enter in a reorganization agreement whereby allowing all voters in the community to vote on a new form of government. And he said that might be allowable. He was going to talk to a lawyer. He told me to try to see if I can call Linda. So, so all I'm saying is that, yes, they've been working on this and working on this. They have not been able to be successful with it. They want themselves to be successful, and they're still working out the kinks, and whatever we have to do to work with them to get something to work for us might happen.
Well, then
Might
this is
not happen.
irrelevant. I mean, if we could have a village-wide, a town-wide village, then we have our fire department, it's
That's
irrelevant.
exactly
We
right.
maintain the status quo.
Right.
Right.
And so that's another reason.
Okay,
We,
I
it's
would
another
like,
reason to.
Well, no, but there's
have
people
to-
going coterminous that they think
So
it's a
that-
virus. I mean,
So that we can get out of here, for
We've
these
gotta
people,
go.
I need
There's
to
another
leave you
meeting.
with one short idea, that was gonna be the concluding thought of
How
this
tall is it?
presentation.
How tall is the item?
It's not something anybody's ever not heard before, but
That was a
maybe
joke.
people forgot.
Short idea.
Yeah,
I picked up on
It's
it.
short,
I got
it's
it.
not, it's short, I know, I went like this with my hand, it's short. Since the where we are right now, forget about what they told you might still be
Yeah, no, I
happening.
know.
We can only talk about where we are right now, what we have. Since as far as where we are right now is that fire district is obviously the elephant in the living room as far as what's going to happen with the voters, not just the planning process. It's going to be the big thing. You do have the ability, the two boards, without anybody having to sign a petition or anything to make it happen. You do have the ability, sometime down the road, hold hearings and discussions to see if the voters here wish to operate under a fire district model. Make that segregated out from the consolidation question, because if that vote were to happen in an informed way on its own, separate from consolidation, without all the heat that comes along with that, and the public were to vote no on doing that, then you already know the outcome of your consolidation
exactly
vote.
right.
And there's no point in going through it as an exercise, and you hope to get Albany to give you better
Yes, yes, but
legislation,
let me
right? So,
let me understand. The status quo is acceptable to the current volunteers, right? Status quo is acceptable.
I can't speak in an official capacity to that, but obviously we're here,
That's
we're
what-
training
that's what
tonight, the
people are
bell's
used to.
ringing.
So that makes the argument for the state, for a village-based system even stronger. Because before, I didn't want the alternative because I didn't want the elected officials running, separate elected officials running the fire service.
Yeah.
Now I want the status quo for an affirmative reason.
Well, the firefighters themselves will work for fire
And
commissioners
save my
the same way they
house.
do now.
All
They
right.
made that
We
clear
are
3
gonna have
years
to
ago.
break up
But
because
just
there's
think
another
about,
meeting.
what I'm saying is think about
I would
segregating the
like
issue.
to bring some closure to this. Number one, I would like for Susan to arrange for a meeting with, and I would hope that Jerry and I and one other member of this committee could join her, and let's get this settled. Because right now, it sounds to me like the efficiency committee recommendation to the joint boards is still on the table.
And still.
And
what
let's
we're-
get some
still what
closure.
we're recommending.
Hmm?
And still what we're
I don't
recommending.
think you
And
know
still-
that that's what you're recommending, because you don't know what the budget's gonna be for your new consolidated entity. We still haven't rerun the financial information, which we said we would
That-
get together
that
and try to
has-
set up.
Steve, that's not even
What to tell my village concept is.
I
in
think,
the
I think
equation right
Kyle
now.
is the best source. His job is actually to help us. Bob Magnus' job is not to help us.
Which I know,
Bob
I
Magnus'
agree,
job is
no,
to
no,
help
Bob Megan wanted me to call him on.
Whose
for
job
other-
is it
for
to
other
help us?
reasons,
Kyle Wilbur works for the Department of State
And
and
he
the
said
local
that they are
government
well,
service.
and they are still willing to help us, and, you know, there's money out there to still help us.
Kyle
do a
Wilbur was
plan.
going to help us 3 years ago. I'm getting a little distressed.
I will
All
write
right,
that
next
down.
meeting then.
Director of
When
New
do
York
we
State
want to
come
meet
village board
next?
meetings to
Is
talk about
5:30 a good
consolidation.
time?
Not gonna happen.
I can do this 2 weeks from tonight.
Which is the
I will
10th
not be here. I'll be out of town.
You
Oh, the
will be-
10th. Oh, no,
The
I'll be
10th.
back.
I can do the
of
10th.
March. How's that for you?
I can do it.
All right. You have
It's a
not
little
said
list of-
anything this evening. Do you have any questions, any thoughts?
Well, the only thing that we're past our time. I do have concerns about having fire district elections, just because I've read those independent of this discussion, and I've seen a ton of issues in regards to those elections because they tend to be low voter turnout. They're run by the fire department, which isn't to say that the fire department does anything iffy with them. It's just different than having an election run by the Board of Elections, and there's issues with public notices and all the rest. And I just have seen some towns that have gotten burned which is
Well,
a terrible
but
pun.
Dan, Steve,
That's a terrible pun.
Steve is not claiming, Steve has already said that in the reality world,
Yes.
the best situation is what we currently
And
have.
I agree with
No,
that.
I said,
Well,
in a very narrow band, I said the best,
But if we
Financial-
best
can't,
financial
Yes.
but
control
if we
Yeah.
can't
method
do
is the
that,
one you have.
then we have
And the
to start
second best
looking at
financial
the
control method is gonna be the fire
Fire
commissioners, which
district.
is the
What
next
time are we gonna
closest
meet on the
Exactly.
replication.
March
5:30.
10th, 5:30 here.
Okay.
I'm deeply troubled by the privatization model. Just leave it.
And
I
with
am
that,
too.
are we
When I
adjourning?
read
I'm deeply
about it,
troubled by it.
I can understand that.
Sally, can we
Can we get a motion to adjourn?
So
A
moved.
motion to adjourn.
Seven.
Second, all in favor?
Secretary's already closed his
All
books.
right. I will see you March 10th at 5:30 here.
Who's gonna be-
Bob